So, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our imaginary fire. Thank you, our American colleagues. We need to come up with a new name for this format, but we'll go with Fireside Chat for now. So, Fionnuala, Managing Director of EMEA, that's a very grandiose title. Maybe you can explain to everybody what your role is and what you do here in Google.
Yeah, what do I do? So it's a job I absolutely love. I've been managing the EMEA region since the 1st of April of this year. And in speaking with many of you over the course of the last few days, I think my job is actually quite similar to your job, right? Which is, trying to get results, in a complex, changing environment, and build the team to do that. And really, when I think about, what I spend most time thinking about and doing, at this stage, with such a talented team, you've met a lot of my team, everyone up on stage yesterday, I mean, they're just absolutely phenomenal. My job is really 90% communications and people. And that's a pretty significant thing to say, considering the size of the business that I run and the complexity and the amount of metrics that we look at and the focus on data in Google. But it really is about communicating a direction and again and again and again, and making sure that the whole team understands the direction we're moving in. And then really getting the right people in place and then understanding how I coach them to get the right results for them and for the business and for our customers. When I think about the multi-layered business that we have, I really try to focus my management team and my leaders first on our core business and what's important in our core business. And that's our be your customer mantra, right? Because if we don't start with that, we don't have anything else. And so I talk a lot and I communicate a lot and really work with my leaders a lot on what is that culture around customers at the core of our business. And then the next layers are about working across the different teams within Google, whether it's in my part of the business or more broadly in other parts of the business. How do we work with teams who don't report to us, who maybe aren't in our same function, to make ourselves successful when we go to market? And that's kind of the next layer of things that I think about. How do we work with them? How do we influence them? How do we have the right plan for France across all those teams, for Russia across all those teams? That's quite involved. And then the last layer I think about is how do we go to market to our customers, to our prospects, from a policy, from a PR perspective, to small businesses all over the region understand how they can partner with Google and what Google can do for them and how they can get value out of that. It's a fascinating job. It really is. The people I get to work with every day are the most talented people I've ever worked with in Google and even before that. So 10 years in Google makes I'm aging. I'm aging by the minute when I hear about 10 years in Google. But previous to that, worked in online and travel industries as well. I have a phenomenal team to work with. It's also just a fascinating region. I mean, it's literally everything from businesses on our doorstep in Ireland. We work a lot with them. Your team works with them, Shane, and we try and get them in as much as possible to trying to understand Yandex in Russia, to trying to understand why there's such hesitancy in France over mobile. I was talking with somebody about that last night, trying to understand all of the various things going on in all of the markets, because at the end of the day, things like consumer confidence are so important to our business. So there's never a dull moment in EMEA, absolutely, for sure, when I think about the vastness of the region that we look after.
So, interested to talk about change. So, yesterday we talked about change and the necessity to be adaptable to change. So, given the size of the organization you run, you must have gone through large change programs, and we reorganize ourselves in Google quite frequently, so as you well know. So, what's your approach to change, and what do you think works when you're approaching a big change management agenda? Yeah.
It does sound like a cliche, but change is a constant here, and I joined Google 10 years ago, as you heard, and change was daily at that point. And even into 2 to 3 years here, I remember at a stage I was doing kind of a central strategy job, and I had been doing it for about 6 months, and I had just about got my plan together about what I was going to do. I had surveyed all of the teams, I'd done the audits, I'd got my beautiful plan, I'd done my presentation, and I just kind of felt that I'd gotten to the space where, I know what I'm going to do here. And of course, the week that I had the plan ready was the week that I was told that I'd be moving into another job. So there really isn't, working in Google, and I think to a large extent working in the business that we work in the sector that we work in, it's really important to have a plan in the now, right? You can't be thinking about, I'll have my plan in 3 months or 6 months. I think it's really important to understand what is the impact that you want to have now in the job beyond just the day-to-day. Like really spending time as soon as you get into a challenge and understand it. What's my plan around that challenge? So I think the impact in the now is a really important mindset I've had. So ever since then, anytime I get into a job, and as you say, we do move ourselves around, we keep people on their toes, we try and move people around and move teams around a lot. Day one in the job, what's the plan? Are the team aligned around the plan? Thinking about impact from day one as opposed to, you know what, in 6 months' time I might have an idea about what I'm doing. And then I think, again, I hope you can relate to this in the audience, is that, you know, when we look at our business, there's a really strong core part of our business that's been working really well for the past 17 years, right? And there's a certain cadence and rigor around that that's really important that we keep up because we're still getting so much growth from that. But at the same time, there are these newer areas, right? We talked a lot about them yesterday. There's video, there's programmatic, there's so many different areas. And I think the challenge to a large extent for me as a leader, and I think for us all as leaders, is how do we do both, right? How do we keep that big core part of our business moving? But then how do we over-invest in some of these newer areas? And in talking about this with my leadership team, we've kind of coined this phrase of perform while we transform. Right? And it's really kind of just to get people in that mindset. And to a large extent, I think this is also what you have ahead of you as leaders as well. You're all, you know, really strong agencies in the performance field. And I know from talking to a lot of you over the past few days, you're thinking about how you double down on mobile still. But a lot of you are thinking about video, and a lot of you are thinking about programmatic. So there's that sense of, in terms of buffering yourselves against the change, really thinking about what is the rigor in my core business that I need to have in place to give me the mind share to really invest in this new stuff? Because the new stuff's not going to happen with a linear investment of mind share and of time and of effort. It has to be over-indexed. And so to a large extent, that's the way we think about it as a leadership team, which is, you know, how do we keep the main core part of our business moving and keep an eye on that performance? But then how are we signaling that we need this overinvestment in some of the newer things where we have to prove out and iterate, you know, operating models and, you know, capability levels in the team much faster so we get to results. So, yeah, it's kind of what I spend most of my time thinking about.
Well, perform while you transform.
Perform while we transform.
People can steal with pride.
Yes.
Yes. So, you've talked about what works and the mantra. What doesn't work? What hasn't worked for you in terms of a big organizational change?
Yeah. So I think any change like this has to be something that you put into context and that you actually have a story around. You know, we talk a lot about narrative, and I know that can sound a bit cheesy, right? But actually, I really do think about what am I marketing to my own team, right? I mean, I don't know if you are managing millennials. I presume you all are, right? And they're a fascinating bunch of people to work with and to manage. And they're looking for meaning in what they're doing, right? Which is actually quite hard, quite hard to manage, right? Because the expectations are so high. So I think in any type of situation like this, where, you know, stakes are high, there's a lot of change and there's a lot of complexity, being able to narrate, literally, this is where we are, this is where we're going, this is the part you're playing, this is why it's important, is really, really important. And it's a story that you're telling over and over and over again, and people relate to that story. And reinforcing that message is incredibly important, to the point where, you know, it's great that, you know, I hear back some of the be your customer mantras, because these are things I have been talking about a lot, and repetition doesn't spoil the prayer, right? I think it's really important for people who are looking for meaning. But equally, if that message isn't there and that signaling isn't there, it doesn't work, right? So if you're out rallying the troops and you've got this massive big change or this big vision or direction, and you want to move your company, or you want to change, you want to double down on video or build a new capability set, and you're out and, you know, you're getting the troops all excited about it, and you go back into your office and you're doing exactly the same things that you did last week, that is a really bad signal. So I think when when the message isn't there with meaning, for the type of employees that we're all hiring, right? We're all working with this millennial generation, and Helen will talk more about that later. The message has to be there for them, and it has to be an authentic one that has some meaning for them, but it has to be matched with signaling. And that really means, as a leader, what's the different thing you're going to do tomorrow? So that people see, okay, the change is happening there. It's not just something that leadership are talking about. And when those signals aren't there to match your message, it actually gets pretty toxic, because people get confused. You're telling me to go this direction, but you're not going this direction. So what am I supposed to do? So I think that's really important. And I think it's also important in looking at your own team and just seeing, making some tough decisions about who can make this journey with you, who can make this change with you. And sometimes not everybody can make that change, right? And in fact, I would challenge you that if everybody has made the journey with you, maybe that change hasn't been big enough, right? So really looking at your team and thinking, do I have the team who can get me through the next 5 years, not just the next 5 months, is often a challenging thing that you have to do as a leader.
Great, okay. So we're going to change pace a little bit and talk about the agency landscape. We've got 235 of the most successful agencies in EMEA here today. So I guess I'm keen to understand how important are agencies to your EMEA business, and how has that evolved over the last number of years?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's been such a huge focus area for us over the past, I'd say maybe 2 to 3 years. We've literally tripled the amount of resources that we have put to our agency business. And when we think about the change, the rate of change and the complexity, we cannot be successful without the agency ecosystem. We just can't. It's already half of our business, and in APAC it's even more than that. When we think about the challenges around video and mobile and the scale at which we need to have impact, we absolutely want to keep investing in our agency partnership. And I suppose what we've been doing a lot internally is investing in resources, investing in capability, and thinking about our own operating models. But now I think we're trying to bring that to you, bring that to market now, and these kind of events are part of that. We're doing more and more of these kind of events where we're reaching out. We want to understand, where are you at in terms of how are you thinking about all of these challenges and opportunities, and how can we work together? So I can't see Google and EMEA being successful without a continued and even stronger partnership with the agency ecosystem.
And with that renewed focus on agencies, are there specific challenges you see that the agency community face that you've picked up on over the last 12 months or so?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of you talked about video and mobile as well. And I think mobile is one where we see that consumers have gotten it, right? The penny has dropped. And I think to a large extent, everybody in this room has gotten it as well. But there's just some stasis there, I think, in some of the smaller businesses in that ecosystem, where people either don't know that don't get that it's important, in which case there's a lot of evangelizing we need to do, or do understand that it's important but don't understand what the next steps are. So I do understand that I need to be there, but I don't have a mobile site, so how do we do that? And so I think that there's a challenge there's a thought leadership challenge, but then there's also a practical challenge of when you've convinced somebody, what are the next steps in terms of being able to partner with with somebody who can actually practically help you with a mobile site. And then I think that's been disruptive for you all in terms of your own operating models, right? I mean, you all are, trying to work profitably, right? And when something new like this is introduced into your operating model, how do you account for that in terms of just the amount of time, the amount of effort, the capability you need to build in your own account management and sales teams? So yes, I've seen a lot of that, and I think that links on then to the question of kind of talent for you as well, which we've heard a lot about.
And just on that specific, in the mobile ecosystem evangelization, what can Google do to help the audience here today?
Yeah, so I think tapping into your own Google team, and I know you're going to be meeting with the teams later, we've thought a lot about this. We do a lot of work in our own sales teams, but I don't think we're going to get to the next level without thinking about the ecosystem, right, and how we stimulate the ecosystem around mobile sites. And so something that we're doing, particularly in EMEA, is that we're working with our fabulous marketing team who are investing in some of our top advertisers who work with agencies in the partner program in 2 markets across EMEA to actually subsidise the cost, half the cost of a mobile site. To really understand what is that journey for some of our small and medium businesses. What's the journey? How long does it take? What are the costs? What are the factors in getting a mobile site set up? And then once you do that, how do you optimize for attribution and measurement and all of these things that we know are so important? So we're really getting hands-on, and we're investing. And I was talking to Helen last night. We're just really anxious to get that up and running and understand some of the learnings, and then share them back with the whole agency ecosystem.
Sure. Okay. You mentioned the business plans and the meetings we're going to be, all the teams are either had or having this afternoon with our account managers. What would you like to see taking place in those meetings, and how pushy should our agency colleagues here be of Google in those meetings?
Yeah, so I've been thinking a lot about this one. This is the key thing, right? I mean, you've all heard the factoids, right? You're full of factoids after yesterday, and you're meeting your teams today, meeting the Google teams today. So I'd say a few challenges. First of all, don't get 5 or 10 minutes into the meeting without agreeing with your Google team who your audience is, right? It's all about audience, right? At the end of the day, I mean, we're all trying to reach the right audience for the right, for all of our customers. And if you're not agreed on that, the rest of the conversation, I think, is not going to be as useful. And when we think about audience, we're all trying to work with businesses to help them find their audience and get whatever value they need to get out of that, right? And when we think about how brands grow, I don't know if any of you have read that book. When we think about our audience, it's all about mental and physical availability, right? Brand loyalty, exists to a certain extent, but availability trumps loyalty. And think about the availability that we have online. And all of the various places we talked about, whether it's search or whether it's whether it's apps, whether it's the web. So, understanding who your audience is and getting agreement on that, because we are significantly investing in our audience products. Even up to last week, launching our customer match product. Understanding then the concept of availability, right? How can you make your customers' brands most available to that audience? So that's the starting point. I think if you don't have that as a start, it's not going to be as useful a conversation. And then I think don't finish the conversation without thinking about platforms like mobile. Mobile isn't one thing. It's not a line item. It's a platform through which you should look at every single thing that you've talked about. And then, a third thing is I always challenge my teams to do is to think about synergies, right? Think about how great things can work together. Think about search and remarketing, RLSA, remarketing through search is such a powerful product. Or you heard about mobile and video. 50% of the YouTube watch time is mobile. How do they work together? Dynamic remarketing and shopping, right? So thinking about those couplings or those synergies where you can get things working together to have that multiplier effect, I think is absolutely key. And then I think lastly, when you think about 2016, think about acquisition. There's still so much upside in every single segment. We look at, mid-market segments and all of the different segments from an acquisition perspective. There's still loads of upside in every single market. And so then understanding how can we do that together, whether it's lead sharing, whether, you have great insights, we have great insights, that's still a huge opportunity for us.
Great. Okay, we're just almost out of time, Fionnuala, so I'll just ask you a final question. Then, any parting words of wisdom or advice you give the agency community here today?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I said, I think we, in speaking with you over the past few days, I think our jobs are incredibly similar. And thinking about your kind of processing everything that you've had today, but then what your story and your narrative back to your own team is, I think is incredibly important, as each one of you are leaders in one way, shape or form. And then really looking at your team and making sure that you have the talent. First of all, having the talent and then keeping the talent. I know this is a huge issue, right? And I know we spend a lot of time, thinking about how we can help you train your team, immersion days on sales skills on mobile. But that's only going to work if it's in the framework of a development agenda that you have for your own people, right? So Google coming in isn't going to keep anybody unless it's part of a meaningful development agenda with the key talent in your organizations. And when we think about the change that's ahead of us all, that's actually going to be a lot of your competitive advantage. And I know Helen's going to be able to give you some tips and tricks from the things that we try here to kind of develop that culture and talent in Google.
Great.
Great.
Fionnuala, thank you so much for sharing your insight and your wisdom with us all today. Fionnuala Meehan, everybody.
Thank you.
So in many of the conversations we had yesterday, and even it's come up just as recently as now, the topic of people continually comes up. Okay, topic of talent, how we hire people, how we onboard talent, how we develop and retain talent. So I'm really excited to introduce our next speaker to you, because that's exactly what we're going to be talking about in terms of talent. So Helen Tynan is our Director of People Operations here in Google in Dublin. It's our biggest site, a Google site outside of the US. So we have 2,500 full-time employees here. So Helen has a key role for us. So Helen joined us in 2010 after spending a number of years in Dell, Oracle and General Electric. So I'm really excited for Helen to come on stage, because she's going to share with you the Google view on talent, what our culture is, what our philosophy is, and how we approach this whole subject. So please join me in welcome Helen Tynan to the stage.
Thank you very much.